room for disagreement there and in other places as far as that goes. But there is room for disagreement in the end times. But with that being said, there's so much in the Bible about the end times that it's good for us to study it and get what we believe. And a lot of times, I've run into people who did not believe the way I believed. And not all the time, but a lot of times, did not believe the way I believed until they started reading the scriptures for themselves because they were going with what someone else had told them. Jack Van Impe or some of those other guys, that really focused on end times. And they trusted them for, that kind of information. So, in Matthew chapter 24, we have seen Jesus talk about the fact that there are going to be wars and rumors of wars and things like that. And everybody agrees that that is going to happen before the end times. That's not controversial. Then he talks about, how there are going to be some other things happen, but the end is not yet. And then he talks about the abomination of desolation. And here's where people start to differ. Because, the abomination of desolation, he talks about that in around verse 15 and 16. And he doesn't talk about the rapture until we get down to around verse 28 or 29. And so people have a difference of opinion of when that's going to happen. I find it interesting that when Jesus is speaking to his disciples about the end times, most of his explanation in Matthew chapter 24 does revolve around the rapture. Because from Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, basically to the end of the chapter, he is explaining the timing of the rapture, which happens, I believe, and this is where I differ from some people, and that's fine, but I don't think God is the author of confusion. So I believe if Jesus puts the abomination of desolation before the rapture, then the abomination of desolation is going to happen before the rapture. That's my belief. And it's not just based on Matthew 24, it's also based on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which we'll look at. Then after that, we'll look at Revelation and see if Revelation fits with the timeline of both of these. Okay? So, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Very interesting to me that there is no time period labeled the Great Tribulation in the Bible. Now, there is Great Tribulation together. And there is also a definite 7-year time period. We see that in the book of Daniel. We see that in the book of Revelation. We see that in a couple places. And there is a midpoint of that 7 years. However, tribulation happens. It's just the fact that the tribulation of that time is going to be greater than any tribulation that has ever been seen. And that's why he says, then shall there be great tribulation. It's not like a set time period. So verse 30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. So what I believe he's saying there is basically from the abomination of desolation to the end, there's a generation there that all these things are going to happen very quickly. The rapture, if you look at Revelation, the vials and the trumpets and that kind of stuff. They're all going to happen within one generation span. And so, we are familiar with generational names in the United States. They're, the baby boomer generation, Generation Z, Generation X, or whatever. And it's a time period of approximately 20 years for each one of these generations. So he's saying these things are going to happen very quickly. And we know that to be the case if you study out the timeline. Basically, a lot of this stuff's going to happen in less than 20 years because there's going to be a generation that does not pass until all of these things happen here at the end times. Because before that, he said there's, wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, whatever, but the end is not yet. Then in verse 15, he says about the abomination of desolation. Then he says that's when it's time to run. And then at the end of that, here, when he gets done with his timeline, basically, I believe, from the abomination of desolation to the rapture, he says all these things are going to happen pretty quickly, within one generation. Then, in verse 36, he gives the famous verse that I believe is very often misinterpreted by people. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So it is true that no one knows the day or the hour when Jesus Christ can come, but that is different than saying that he could come at any moment. We do know the season, and he just gave us the parable of the fig tree above it, saying you can observe the season and you know about when it's going to happen. But nobody's going to be able to say, hey, I think it was Harold Camping a while back said, it's going to be this date. Didn't happen. They said, it's going to be this date. Didn't happen. Then he died because he was very old. But he was one of those guys that set a lot of dates. Based on this, it's going to be this date. No, it's not going to be that date. So then he says there in verse 37. So he gives a lot of explanation about the day and hour knoweth no man. And it's interesting to me that a lot of the people that take that verse and tell you that it could happen at any moment only use that verse out of Matthew chapter 24. They don't preach about the surrounding verses, the fig tree, or below it here. We have, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So it's going to be like the days of Noah. Okay? For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. What does that tell us? Okay? So, as in the days of Noah, because I really like this example here. As in the days of Noah, that's when Jesus Christ is coming back. Okay? Now, if we remember the days of Noah, it had never rained before. Rain was going to be something completely new. Before Noah entered the ark, there was no such thing as rain. Okay? So, then Noah enters the ark and the door is shut. Now, Noah did not know, I don't believe, exactly when the door was going to be shut or when he was going to enter the ark. However, he builds the ark. Okay, is he going to enter the ark before it's built? He knows he's not going to do that. He knows God's not going to shut the door before the ark is built. He gets the ark completed. Okay? Is God going to shut the door on Noah now? No, because something else still has to happen. The animals have to enter the ark. God's not going to flood until the animals enter the ark. Okay? Once the animals enter the ark, and Noah and his family is in the ark, now God could shut the door at any moment. Okay? But not before then. There are signs. There are things that have to happen before God shuts the door. Number one, the ark has to be finished. Number two, the ark has to have animals in it, all the provisions and everything. Then it has to have Noah in it. Then the door's shut. Okay? At that point, all of the unsaved, they see Noah go in the ark, and they see the door shut. Right after the door shuts, it starts raining. Okay? It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. Probably a hard rain. I mean, and look, it doesn't take very long for rain to sweep things away in a flood, but as soon as it started raining, did everybody on the outside die? No. They were probably scared to death of the rain that was coming, but it took them hours to die, I'm sure, or maybe even days, depending upon where they were, because floods don't just immediately happen. They happen after a period. So if you look at the story of Noah as a story of the rapture and everything, Noah is now safe inside of the ark with the door shut. It is now too late for anybody else to get into the ark, and now they get rained on. That's the same way it's going to be in the end times. We're going to have certain things happen. Then we're going to be ready for the rapture. When the rapture comes, now God does the vials and all that stuff. He's pouring out his wrath on this earth. And gradually it gets more and more people. Because it kind of ratchets it up as he goes. And so that's kind of, an analogy there that he uses with Noah and the ark and the flood, and then the rapture and the wrath of God being poured out on this earth. Because the wrath of God being poured out on this earth is going to be like nothing anybody has ever seen. But for most, it's just going to be uncomfortable for a little bit. But, then all of a sudden, you're going to get the scorpions coming out of hell and stinging people, and then, being hurt for 5 months, and it's just going to get worse and worse. We've got the witnesses. A lot of interesting things that are going to happen in the end times that we're not going to be here to see. We may see it from heaven or something like that. So that's something that he has here. And then here he says, verse 39, so they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Verse 40, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. This is a verse that people like to use. Yes, and it is true. Watch, because you don't know what hour he will come. Verse 43, Jesus says, but know this. Okay, so you don't know what hour that he's going to come. Verse 43, but know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So, you need to be ready, he says, and watch. And if you know what hour he's coming, or rather you just know he's coming at the night, in the night. But you don't necessarily know what hour he's coming. But a good man will be ready. Then he says there in verse 45, who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I look at this back part of this, and this is where I sort of converge back with those who believe that Jesus Christ could come at any moment. He could come at any moment for you. He could come at any moment for me. He should find us ready. In other words, I don't believe that Jesus Christ will come in the clouds tomorrow. Now, if I live long enough to see the Antichrist and the abomination of desolation, at that point, I will be looking for Jesus Christ every day. And he may not come the day after, And he may not come 2 days after, but he will come within a few months or years. That's what the Bible tells us. Okay? But by the same token, he could come for me. He could cut me asunder anytime. Okay? So we should always be ready. And this is where sometimes I think maybe preachers or maybe some people are like, well, let's give people a matter of urgency and say he could come at any moment. Because if they think, well, he's not going to come tomorrow, then tomorrow I can get drunk and I will be fine. But maybe you might get run over by a car while you're drunk. You wouldn't want him to see you in that state either. Or that be the reason you get to heaven either. You know, because there are saved people, I am sure, over the course of the automobile who have gotten drunk, got in a car, drove down the road, killed themselves and somebody. That's not really how you want to meet the Lord. Yeah, sorry, I got drunk and killed somebody. I would rather meet him, through a crash that's not my own fault. Ideally, I would like to meet him just dying peacefully in my sleep, whenever that may be. Whether that's tonight or whether that's, 40 years from now or whatever. That's my ideal time of meeting the Lord. But I have no control over that, no say over that, and I don't know when that is going to occur. So I should be acting like I am ready for it to happen at any time. And that is, I believe, part of Jesus' teaching here as well. Yeah. But the actual rapture itself, I don't believe is going to happen until the Antichrist comes. And the reason I believe that is because it is consistent that way all through Scripture when you're talking about the rapture. Paul talks about it because, I like studying end times prophecy, and a lot of people focus on the book of Revelation, but there is a lot of end times prophecy in other books, in Daniel, in Ezekiel. Ezekiel covers a lot of prophecy about what's going to happen basically, like in the 1,000-year reign and that kind of thing. Isaiah as well. When Isaiah talks about the lion lying down with the lamb and a child putting his hand over the hole of a snake and not getting bitten, that is happening during the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ, which happens after Matthew chapter 24. So, there's a lot of different places, tons of different places in the Bible, Old and New Testament, that we get end times teaching. The thing about it is, it has to all add up. It has to, in the Bible, it has to all fit in. It has to all make sense. The timeline, anywhere a timeline is given, has to line up. In Matthew chapter 24, the timeline is basically increased persecution, wars, rumors of wars, a lot of people coming as false prophets, things like that. Yeah, we're seeing that. A falling away, okay, where, kids are going to be against their parents, parents are going to be against their kids. We're seeing that. Okay? Because these days, I'll tell you what, kids don't care a whole lot about their parents. And unfortunately, a lot of parents are becoming where they don't care a whole lot about their kids either. So we're seeing a lot of this falling away. And then Jesus says, but when the abomination of desolation appears, that's when things are going to ratchet up. And then when things are going to ratchet up, after that, then he gives Jesus coming in the clouds. Okay, so is that a timeline that matches up elsewhere? Go with me to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All right, take me a little while to get there, sorry. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is Paul, of course, writing to the Thessalonians, he talks to them a fair amount, actually, about the end times. And if you read the books of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, it becomes apparent that the reason he writes them these letters is because they're a little bit concerned about the end times. They ask him questions about it. And so he's answering them in these letters. He also writes to the Corinthians a little bit about the end times as well, and some in other places, but really focuses on it with regard to the Thessalonians. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul writes, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand." What is he telling the Thessalonians here? He's telling them, look, as far as the rapture is concerned, I want to set your mind at ease. Don't be deceived by other false prophets or anything like that, that the day of Christ is at hand. It is not, is basically what he's telling them. Okay? Verse 3. "Let no man deceive you by any means." That means the fancy math that these guys put out, saying, oh, well, here, this is when he's going to come, this is when he's going to come, this is when he's going to come, or whatever. Don't let that deceive you. Nobody can set a date. Okay? And also, let no man deceive you by fancy means saying, hey, he could show up tomorrow as well. Because, that's not the case either, according to Paul. He says there, "For that day shall not come except there come a falling away first." That lines up with what Jesus said in Matthew 24. There's going to first be a falling away. I believe that we are in the falling away because of the fact that it is very difficult. It's more difficult now to get people saved than it was 20 years ago. It's more difficult now to get people to go to church than it was 20 years ago. It's more difficult for everything in Christianity than it was 20 years ago. And our government is becoming more and more morally corrupt. And, you're like, well, that's the government. Look, the government is a picture of its society, especially in the United States of America. We elect these people. So, these raging, pro-abortion people that get elected, people are electing them. So, morally, we are falling away. That's happening. Notice what he says there in verse 3. "Except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." So right there is a good Paul-style description of the abomination of desolation. That's it. Right there. The Antichrist setting himself up in Jerusalem as God. The rapture is not going to happen until that happens. God is not coming, Jesus Christ is not coming in the clouds until that happens. And this lines up perfectly with Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus basically says, here's the abomination of desolation. Now we got problems. Now you're running, now you're hiding, now, get ready, because now everything's going to happen very fast. Yeah. In Jesus' eyes, probably everything's going to happen fast anyways, because time is irrelevant to him. But in our eyes, 20 years is different than 5 years, for the most part. So, so he says there in verse 4, this, the guy that's going to be revealed, the son of perdition, of perdition, the son of perdition, opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? So, they're concerned. Oh, well, can it come at him? When is Christ coming? Some people get focused on that more than others. And now ye know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. So now you know what is keeping him from coming in, tomorrow or something like that. What is withholding? Verse 7, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. It's, great stuff on end time stuff. We talked, for example, this morning a little bit about the thing that's going on in in Kentucky and the little university, Asbury, Kentucky, and it's funny that it seems to me like we have fewer and fewer Christians in the world, yet pastors are talking more and more and more about love and the love of God and putting love into action. It's just, that's really all you hear from a lot of these. But do you ever have them seeking the love, as it says here in verse 10, of the truth, that they might be saved? The love of the truth, that they might be saved. What is the love of the truth? The love of the truth is not the same as just unconditional, non-hypocritical, fancy words love that we use for people, so that we can not make waves and just invite all sorts of homosexuals into the church to lead worship and things like that, all because we just love them, and we just love this person and love that person, and we welcome in Catholics and we welcome in Mormons. And look, Christianity is good about this. Here's what really opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of Christians do not want the love of the truth, but rather they just don't want to make waves and not have any love at all. This happened years ago, is when Mitt Romney ran for president as a Mormon, and I heard a lot of pastors say, and the reason that they said this was because Mitt Romney was a Republican. Because, look, as we know, every good Christian is a Republican, right? Yeah. There are a lot of Baptist churches out there that believe if you're a Christian, you're a Republican. And if you're not, then you're a false Christian. Look, politics and Christianity has nothing to do with each other. But there were a lot of, Franklin Graham and a lot of these guys that were falling all over themselves for Mitt Romney because he was a Republican. I can't even remember who he was against. Was it Barack Obama? Was he against Barack Obama one of Barack Obama's times? I can't remember. It was Mitt Romney versus maybe Barack Obama once. Okay. And, Barack Obama is the devil. But, Mitt Romney, well, yeah, he's a Mormon, but they're basically Christians. I heard a lot of pastors say that. And I don't know if you remember or not, but I did preach a sermon one time that says, no, he's not. Vote for him if you want, but do not tie him to Christianity. Don't do it. The truth of the matter is, Mormons are not Christians. I don't care if they're Republican or not. They're not. So don't say that they are, because, we're just, we want to legitimize them because they believe worldly closer to us than Barack Obama. Don't get too caught up. It's okay to get a little caught up. In other words, it is all right to vote. Okay? But don't get too caught up in the politics of this world. Don't get too bent out of shape with Joe Biden. who's president. It's kind of entertaining because this is not we are pilgrims. We are passing through. The one that we should worry about is the one that's going to be set up in the kingdom forever and ever, the one that we're going to be in. So that's the one we should focus on. And he's not a politician. There is no opposition party when it comes to the eternal kingdom of Jesus Christ. The opposition party is going to get burned up and thrown into hell, outer darkness. So let's not get tore up about Democrats versus Republicans. I say this because I have family members who go to Baptist churches who say, you've got to be a Republican. Oh, you're not a Republican? It's like, hey, next Sunday, the altar's right there. You need to repent. They get all tore up about it. No. Yes, vote for who you think will do the best. Live under whoever is there. And please God rather than men. Obey the higher authority. So if the higher authority is the government who says you have to pay this amount of taxes, God doesn't care how much taxes your human government puts on you. Okay? So you pay those. But if your government tells you you cannot preach, you cannot pray, you cannot do this, you cannot do that contradicts with God's word, then we disobey the government. If it doesn't contradict God's word, we don't disobey the government. And if the government gets harder and harder to live under, it is probably our own fault. Because I know a lot of people that will vote for Democrats who kill babies even though they know that God is upset with it because they're a Democrat. But I don't see Republicans, falling all over themselves to completely kill abortions either. They just do it, less than Democrats. So I try not to get, real political or anything like that. Everybody has their own beliefs when it comes to that. That is separate from Christianity. All I'm saying is don't get caught up in it like so many Christians do, because it's really not that important when it comes to the end times. I'm not sure how I got off on that. Speaking of end time stuff, sometimes I kind of wonder. So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 looks to me like it lines up perfectly with Matthew chapter 24, and that's why I followed that timeline. And we're going to see in the book of Revelation, starting next week, then, that it should line up as well in this timeline. So the book of Revelation is where we will start with next week. So basically the timeline that I see it is, we've got wars, rumors of wars, things like that. We're living those. Jesus says all those things are going to happen. There's going to be a falling away. There's going to be more and more of that kind of stuff in the world. We're living that right now. There's going to be tribulation. Christians, the persecution is going to kick up a notch. The Antichrist will be revealed. That piece, really in my mind, is the only piece that we're really waiting on. Because he hasn't been revealed yet. You say, well, how do you know? Because the Bible says when he is revealed, as we see here in Matthew 24 and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, everybody will know. Everybody who's Christians will know. That's the Antichrist.
And they're going to worship it.
Yes, except for Christians who will not be deceived. The elect will not be deceived.
But it's going to be so good.
Yes. But I have heard that, I've heard since I was a child who was saved, who was old enough to understand the Bible, I have heard of every president since then, starting with Ronald Reagan, people said we're the Antichrist. The big thing with Ronald Reagan was, his name is Ronald Wilson Reagan, and each one of his names, I'll never forget this, somebody told me, each one of his names has 6 letters. 6, 6, 6. Right there he is, the Antichrist. There, so everybody's going to say, oh, there's the Antichrist. But no, everybody will know. It's not just going to be, let's see. No, it's going to be obvious to Christians. Not to people who are not Christians, because they're not looking for the Antichrist. They're not. People who are not Christians, he's just going to be some great leader who's, uniting the world in communism or whatever he's going to do. But Christians are going to be able to look and say, there he is. We better get ready. Yeah. Because we will know. They will not. So that has to happen. And then after the rapture and during the Antichrist reign, God is going to pour out his wrath on this earth. God's wrath is different than Great Tribulation or the Great Tribulation, because God does not pour out his wrath, and the Bible, the Old Testament, the prophets tell us this, God does not pour out his wrath on his own people. But when the rapture is here, there won't be any more of his people, except for the 144,000 who will be sealed for special protection and all that. So we'll cover all that stuff, in the book of Revelation. I don't understand everything about the end times, but I'll give you what I think. And to me, it makes sense, and sometimes it'll, open up something for you. It's always been a very interesting study for me, so I like to do it from time to time. So, so we're going to wind up, and a lot of people don't understand. There's like, oh, well, then there's the rapture, and then that's it. Well, then that's not it. No, there's a lot that happens after the rapture. God pours out his wrath on this earth. This earth gets mad, and all the armies of the earth gather together for a battle of Armageddon. See, people, they watch too much television or something like this. They don't understand, because God is going to destroy the armies at Armageddon. Is that it? No, that is not it. It's going to be a very interesting time, though, because Armageddon is destroyed. The devil is chained in hell. Then we have a 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ on this earth that people say is going to burn up. On this very earth that we are standing on now, we are going to have the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. After the 1,000 years, what's going to happen? Because during the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ on this earth, we are going to have babies being born, according to the Bible, and people living. After that 1,000-year reign, Satan is going to be let loose again for a little season, and that little season is not talked about, how long it's going to be. We don't know. It's not going to matter to us, because we are already going to have our heavenly bodies. We're already going to be, all that. But Satan is going to be let loose on this earth after the 1,000-year reign and the rapture and everything for a little season to deceive yet again. Is a little season 5 years? Is it 100 years? Is it 500 years? The Bible does not say. After that, there's going to be one more battle. Satan's got his armies that he's been able to deceive. There's going to be one more battle, and then we get the new heaven and the new earth and all that. And then, hell's going to be cast into outer darkness. So it's a timeline that a lot of people, they kind of think it kind of stops at the rapture. It doesn't. There's a lot more after the rapture. A lot of time to go still. So, we are not at the very end of the earth's age or anything like that. There's a long ways to go. Now, we may be getting closer to the rapture of the saved. That's certainly, we're getting closer to that. But as far as to the end of everything, we're not. A lot of people don't really realize that there is so much left for this earth. So, a lot of good stuff, and we'll look at some of that in the book of Revelation and in some other places as we go through the next few weeks. I'm not going to spend, a year on